So thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Empowering the Disability Vote, presented by the Systems Change Network. The Systems Change Network is a network of nearly 40 community organizers working in the disability community across California in independent living centers across the state. And our community also includes many, many advocacy team members and people with disabilities across California. Today's training, Empowering the Disability Vote, is the third part in a series of trainings about getting out the vote in California in 2012. The first one we started off with was Building the Disability Vote, about voter registration and outreach. And then we included information in our training on organizing meetings, about how to organize large meetings like candidate forums and voter education forums. And today we're going to be talking about get out the vote techniques. So let's take a look at who our presenters are today. First, I'm going to start with myself, Ted Jackson. I work for the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and I have a fair amount of experience on national, statewide, and local campaigns across the country. With us today as well is Phil Shepard. Phil Shepard is the Systems Change Advocate, or SCNet organizer, at Marin Center for Independent Living. And he is recently retired from as a public school educator and administrator who spent 47 years teaching and working with children and adults in grades K through 12 and adult school. In the Emory Unified School District, he was Director of Special Education and specialized in laws and legal procedures related to special education. During the 1990s, he also published bi-weekly newspaper articles in the Marin Scope. Mr. Shepard has also spent extensive time working with people who have disabilities and with organizations and agencies that plan for and respond to major disasters, with a focus on the elderly and persons with disabilities. Mr. Shepard has a Bachelor of Music from Manhattan School of Music, a Master of Arts degree in Education from New York University, a Master of Science in Education Administration from Fordham University, and a Tier 2 credential from California State University, Hayward, California. Phil is really smart. And also with us today is George, another very smart guy who's a colleague of mine. George is the Systems Change Advocate, or SCNet organizer, at Disability Resource Agency for Independent Living. And George has been at DRAIL for 10 years. He's been DRAIL's Systems Change Advocate for the past 7, and he's most passionate about access within his community. And I know that George does some wonderful work around access and polling place access, and has for many years. So here's a look at today's agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about why we should vote. It's about our voice, our choice, and our vote. And it really means something. It's a way of expressing ourselves in our democracy. Then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of planning a Get Out the Vote campaign. And what's exciting is that we're really going to make it a little bit specific to this year and this year's calendar. And then we're going to talk about the war room. And we'll start off with a little story about why it's called the war room, and we'll go over some tactics for GOTV, which means get out the vote. And your voter community is the next section. Who do you get out to vote? So we'll be talking about outreach there and strategizing and building lists. And then the final part, we'll be talking about preparing for access, pre-election day accessibility projects. All right, so why should we vote? Because it's our voice, it's our choice, and it's our vote. Our job here at the Systems Change Network and as nonprofits across the state really is to educate people about voting and appreciate their independence in choosing who they vote for and casting their vote and making sure they have the opportunity. It's about educating and appreciating. So with that, we're going to start off with a little video from Center for Independence in San Mateo. They put it together about why people with disabilities should.
I think voting is our most basic rights as Americans, and as Californians, because it's our chance to get our voices heard.
When I first registered to vote, this was a very exciting day for me because this gave me the opportunity to have a tiny voice in the shaping of the United States of America.
I vote every time because I think it's a very important right and responsibility in this country. It's something that a lot of people and a lot of countries don't get to do. It gives us a chance to have a say-so in how our country's run.
To me, voting is important because everybody should have a say in who they vote for and their beliefs and what they're voting for.
We are a large minority in this country, and if we don't support candidates and measures and propositions that support the programs that are important to our quality of life, then it's very, very probable that there will no longer be those programs.
I think that the voting is important because you have to let your legislators know that you are out there paying attention to what they're doing, and that if they don't do what you want, you're going to vote them out.
I encourage everybody to register and vote in every election and really be alert and aware of the issues. You couldn't drive a car if you weren't aware of the rules of the road. You need to be aware of what's going on around you so that you can vote intelligently and keep this a great country.
If you have a disability and you have the freedom to vote, whether you're at home doing a absentee ballot or at the voting post, so I urge you all to come out and vote.
We need to remember that we are productive members of society and that we are members of this community, and we need to continue to just strengthen ourselves and strengthen our disability community.
I urge everybody to please register and vote, because to give your own opinion is really a very important deed that you do for others and for the whole government.
So now we're going to talk about planning your Get Out the Vote campaign. And whenever you begin planning a Get Out the Vote campaign, there's 3 rules that you really need to stick by. The first one is you want to plan backwards. You always want to know where you're headed. You always want to know what lies ahead in the road. And so if you plan backwards, you can plan accordingly and you can execute accordingly because you know what to expect. Also, we want to remember that voting is now a 5-week process. Minds change, but votes do not. I can't tell you how many times in past election cycles, probably the last 3 to 4 election cycles, when I've spoken to people who've told me that, oh, I wish I had changed my vote, or, oh, I wish I could change my vote. And so it's really kind of important for us is that when someone decides that voting is important for them, and when they decide that something about disability issues is important for them, that we want to lock in their vote in their process to vote by getting them out to the polls, especially with vote by mail, and getting them to cast that vote and put it in the mail. It is a 5-week process now. And then the other thing is tracking numbers. We have a mantra on GOTV campaigns that everyone counts, and really everything is about numbers, because what we're doing is counting down to 0. If we start with a list of 1,000 voters in our area that we want to remind to vote, and we're going to call them and contact them until they tell us that they have voted, and we're going to cross them off that list, and we're going to keep checking that list, and we want to count that list all the way down to 0 so we know that everyone has voted. So we're going to talk about planning your GOTV campaign in 2 sections. Now remember, we were talking about planning backwards, so we're going to talk about this backwards. So we're going to start with your poll push, And then your mail push. The poll push obviously is geared towards people who vote on Election Day, and the mail push is geared towards people who are going to vote by mail. Obviously, the vote by mail people get their ballots first. And another thing that's really important in planning your Get Out the Vote campaign is that we're talking about voter contact. It's not just enough to register someone to vote and then hope that they're going to go out and actually vote. But we need a personal touch, whether it's by telephone, by mail, or face-to-face. We need to connect with that person and remind them of why they registered to vote, the conversation we had when we registered them to vote, about why it's important, and to really push them out all the way until they do it. And this is probably going to take about 5 to 7 contacts per voter. It's that old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. When I've done other voting trainings, I always like to share the story of when my stepmother tells my father to take out the trash, and it takes about 5 to 7 times for her to say it until he actually does it. It's kind of the same thing with voting. And somewhere around time 3 and 4, he'll get really frustrated and angry, but by 6 or 7, he's like, okay, I did it, and it's over with. And voters are kind of the same way as people are with their chores. We have to pester them a little bit to get them out there to go out and vote. So let's start talking about our poll push. And poll pushes usually happen in 5 stages in the last 3 weeks before Election Day. I'm going to talk about some time frames and some of the terminology that GOTV campaigns use comes out of a sense of time frames, but sometimes they don't exactly match up, and you're going to see that with like our 10-day sprint this year. The way I've mapped it out with specific dates, it may be 12 or 13 days. That's because you can't always count on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November always being the 2nd of November. Sometimes you have an extra week thrown in there, but we kind of use this terminology and use this model. So the 5 stages, of course, are Election Day. Election Day, we're going to find out, is the last chance. It's the most important in that last week. Then we have the 72-hour push. It's those 72 hours right before Election Day. It's our final chance to push people out and remind them to vote. Before that, we've got a 10-day sprint, which, like I said, can be a little bit longer than 10 days. And it's really our sprint to reach the most people that we can that are registered to vote. Remind them about why voting is important and remind them to vote. And then we've got Super Saturday. Super Saturdays are always great because people are at home on Saturdays in the fall, and it's a great time to call voters, to knock on their doors, to drop literature, to catch them where they live, and to really ramp up folks for the last couple weeks for the campaign. And then before that, you've got your ramp week. That's your preparation week, when we're going to do volunteer recruitment, materials preparation, and strategizing. So now we're going to go through these in a little bit more detail. Election Day, it's the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and this year it's November 6th, 2012. On Election Day, here are some of the things that you're going to be thinking about and the tasks that you're going to be doing on Election Day. Now I'm going to go through these a little bit later in more specificity, but the first thing is barrier response. And you'll see that these Election Day things that I have listed here, these items, really do correspond to the kind of time of day. Barrier response is the first thing that you want to have going in the morning. You want to have that team or that person maybe sitting by the telephone at 6:45 in the morning, because when polls open at 7 a.m., they want to be by the phone in case people are having problems with accommodations, accessibility, things of that nature, and you want to have a phone list next to them of legal resources they can call, or that phone numbers that you can forward on to the voter who calls your hotline. Next thing to remember about Election Day, it's your last chance, get out the vote, phone banks. You usually want to do 3 shifts starting about 10 o'clock in the morning. In California, it is against the regulations and the laws to call previous to 9 a.m. So you can't call until after 9 a.m. to make voter calls. So you usually start really about 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's when things have kind of settled down. You have your morning rush to the polls when people who vote before work, and I tend to be one of those people myself. I like to get up early on election day and vote before work. When those folks have done their voting, they've gone. If you're going to do any checking off of lists at polling places, things like that, really you don't want to do that till about 9:30 when that morning rush is done anyways, and that's going to give you a good indication of who you need to call and who you don't need to call in that first morning checkoff. And then of course you want to have a lunch shift or early afternoon shift to really push people out. Again, checking your list again, see who you have who's voted, and refreshing your list and seeing who you need to contact. And then of course, the last thing that you need to do, the last shift, is that 4 to 8 block. That's your last absolute chance. That's the person who has waited and said, yeah, I'm going to vote, and they've said, oh, I'm going to vote before work, I'm going to vote on lunch, and they didn't, and they're still on your list, and you haven't checked them off yet. And so you want to be able to have as many resources, as many people as possible, because that person is the hardest person to get out to vote. However, we do need that person to vote. Voting is a right in this country, and it's a right that is an absolutely wonderful thing that most people don't have in a lot of countries. So we want to push those people out to vote. The other thing that you're going to be doing throughout the day is knock and drag. Knock and drag, quite simply, is going to someone's doorstep, finding them at home, finding them at work, finding them wherever, and dragging them to the polls, making sure they go out and vote. They're those people that the direct mail piece didn't work, the telephone call didn't work, the several telephone calls didn't work, and now you just have to go find them and make sure they go to vote. In a lot of situations, it may be because they need a ride, and we can arrange for a ride for them or something like that. But a good friend and someone that I consider a mentor named Dave Fleischer at the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center. I used to do some work with him on some campaigns when he was at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. And one thing that he used to always tell us was, you're going to find a voter on Election Day where you met them the first time. And that's so important because that's also going to inform your outreach, which we're going to talk a little bit later. In LGBT initiative campaigns, we tend to do a lot of happy hour bar outreach because the gay bars are packed at happy hour after work. And so sometimes if that's where you met the person, that's where you're going to have to go to find them. If you met them at church, you may have to go to church to find them. But if you met them on their doorstep, then that's where they're going to be on Election Day too. Go to their doorstep and see if they need a ride or something like that. And then all day, you're going to be counting down that list, which we've alluded to so far. You're going to be checking people off and reducing the size of that list, and every hour or so reorganizing your calls. So now we're at the 72-hour push, which is basically Saturday, Sunday, and Monday before Election Day. This year it's November 3rd through the 5th, 2012. The important things to stress on these 3 days is that you're going to need a lot of volunteers because this is your last opportunity to give a reminder call. Remember, the call that you make to a voter on Election Day is not a reminder call. Election Day is here. That's a, we need you to vote right now. With the 72-hour push, we're still giving reminder calls to people that haven't voted yet or haven't made a commitment to voting yet, especially with the mail ballots. What's important about this period of time is you are going to come across people who will vote by mail, and maybe it just took them until the last weekend for them to make up their decision. I've done that before. There's some hard decisions out there that people are going to have to make. And so you want to make sure that you connect with them, because unfortunately a lot of people think that if they haven't filled out their ballot and sent it in by that day, that they can't vote, but they can. This is the education piece that happens in the last 72 hours, to educate them that they can still fill out their ballot and they can take it into their polling place. During this period of time, you also may want to consider doing a door-to-door lit drop. We're going to talk a little bit more about door-to-door lit drops and why they're important. And then we have our pre-election day list countdown. The pre-election day list countdown is very, very important, because there's so much activity that happens on this day that you're going to or these 3 days, you're going to reconnect with people who maybe you weren't able to get a hold of in the last week or so because it's a weekend. And you're going to be able to find vote by mail people who have told you that they sent it in, and so you're really going to reduce the size of those people who are voting by mail that you're going to have to hunt down and educate about taking it into the polls. And then of course at the end of it, you're going to want to reorganize your calls and evaluate them. You're going to reorganize and say, so here's our list size now. Let's evaluate how many volunteers we need on election day. Let's evaluate which calls we need to prioritize, and are there certain areas that of the city, for example, that seem to have transportation issues and need more help, things like that. All right, so continuing our poll push, the period of time before that is our 10-day sprint. This is our period of time where we're going to contact the largest number of voters. It's your goal during this period of time, as one of your 5 to 7 contacts, to contact everyone. If someone doesn't vote all the way until election day, they probably will get 7 contacts. You will probably contact the highest priority people on the 72-hour push. Obviously on election day, everyone who hasn't voted. But during this 10-day sprint, you want to contact everyone that's on your list. So if your list is 500 people, it should be pretty easy if you got some volunteers. If your list is 2,000 to 5,000 people, which some independent living centers and some nonprofit organizations might have a list that big, you're really going to have to buckle down and get some volunteers and get some phone lines and really contact everyone and make sure that they get out and vote. During this period of time, you're going to be reminding them that election day is coming up, or that if they have a vote by mail ballot, that they need to send it in. This is your final push comes during this period of time. On the calendar, it falls around October 22nd to November 2nd this year. And what's really imperative about this period of time is you're going to have some carryover from your mail push. You'll have some people out there who haven't filled out their mail ballots yet. And October 30th is the deadline for putting it in the mail. If it's postmarked by October 30th, it's guaranteed to get to the county registrar and get counted, according to the Secretary of State's website. And during this period of time also, we recommend that you do a direct mail reminder. We'll talk about the different forms of reminders. We've been talking a lot about phone calls, but there's different forms of reminders that are important. We'll talk about that further into this training. And then nearing the beginning, I almost said nearing the end, but we are working backwards. Nearing the beginning, we have our Super Saturday, which is our mid-October kickoff. October 20th is where it falls this year. You want to usually have a kickoff party if you're going to do a Super Saturday. If your nonprofit isn't open on the weekend, you could probably still do one on a Thursday or Friday or a Monday or Tuesday around this. Have a pizza party, really kick off the election season, maybe even have a voter education event as part of it, and then everyone get on the phone and start calling voters. Start calling people on your list and reminding them to vote. And then the week before that is your ramp week. One of the things that I didn't really put on the presentation here, but that's kind of important about your ramp week, is that it's your week to get started, to rev up your engines to get going, but also if you've done a vote by mail push, this is your week to relax a little bit because you've been pushing for a few weeks on vote by mail. So this is your week to take a breath, to do some debriefing, praise yourself for your best practices and take note of those things that you learned from, and to reorganize and to re-strategize. Volunteer recruitment is going to be really important during this period of time. One of the reasons that it's going to be so important is that typically if somebody is responsible enough to register to vote by mail, they're going to fill it out and send it in. It does actually increase voter turnout. States like Oregon, who have all vote by mail, have incredibly high voter turnout. And then when you're in a push situation for the polls on Election Day, it really is a stronger push to actually make people go down to the polling place. My polling place is 2 blocks from my house, so it's really easy for me. But I can remember even being a voting professional when my polling place wasn't so close. I always thought, oh, I got to go down there. But you have to do it. And you're really going to have to push some people out to get that done. You want to center on volunteer recruitment phone banking during this period of time, so calling your own base. If you're really smart, you'll add a volunteer recruitment component to your Get Out the Vote script when calling for mail voters, making sure that they've sent their ballot in and then following up with the question, so you know the whole thing's not over yet. Now that you've mailed your ballot, would you like to come down here and help us phone bank? And also you're going to do some materials planning because your materials are going to change a bit from the vote by mail push to your poll push. All right, so now we're going to move on to mail push. First 2 weeks of October is generally that period of time. Ballots we're going to see in a moment drop on October 8th here in California, but we want to start a little bit before that. And as I said, the dates don't exactly line up. Because of the election season, all the deadlines are a certain number of days from November or from Election Day, which is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and sometimes that's the first week, and sometimes it's the second week. But it kind of gives us a general idea of the time frame. And as you're going to see, it's pretty much the same schedule. As we go through them individually, though, you'll see some tweaks and some differences. There's Election Day. Before that is a 72-hour push. Before that, a 10-day sprint, a Super Saturday, and of course, a ramp week. So let's talk about Election Day. What's different in the United States now with vote by mail is that once those mail ballots get dropped, Election Day is every day. It's no longer for everyone that Tuesday in November. For some people, and an increasing number of people, it's actually every day. And this year, the ballots will be dropped October 8th. So you want to catch them while you can. Remember, minds change. You may have a great conversation about somebody about issues that are important to people with disabilities, and that's why they should vote. Or you may have a great conversation with a person with a disability and the fact that they should vote, but then they may walk away from that conversation and a week later feel like, my vote doesn't count. Why should I vote? So you want to seize the moment. Election Day is every day. And that also means that you're going to be doing list countdown every day. Some days you're going to see more movement than others, but it's something that you should be in the practice of doing. In the 72-hour push, which is a Saturday through Monday, in our schedule here for the Systems Change Network, that's October 13th through October 15th. You want GOTV mail-in ballot push phone bank. That's 3 days of just hitting those people really, really, really hard. In a sense, the 72-hour becomes like your Election Day action when it comes to vote by mail, because it is really your hardest push. At the end of it, you want to reorganize and do your call evaluations, because really by the middle of October, you're going to have talked to the most responsible people in your voter pool that are voting by mail, and You're going to check them off that they voted, and the folks that you've got left, you know that you're going to have to give them a push. And probably about half of those folks are going to need to walk those ballots into their polling places on Election Day. So it gives you a good idea for some strategy. One thing I will say on top of that is that although we sort of put aside 2 to 3 weeks for the mail push, it really happens all the way to Election Day. It's just a concentrated period of time where we concentrate specifically on that particular type of voter. And then this 10-day sprint is from Super Saturday to the 72-hour push period. This year on the Systems Change Network GOTV calendar, that's September 29th through October 12th. Just similar to the other one, you're going to want to do a GOTV phone banks every day or in the evening. You're going to evaluate your methods. You want to call all of your voters, and you want to do your vote by mail push. So we call this a lock and load. Vote by mail is the strategy of the day today for campaigns and for those campaigns that want our votes. So they're going to put a lot of time and energy into vote by mail as well. And it seems, it feels like a lock and load situation. I can tell you that when we looked at the polling data, the exit polling data, and all the statistics after the 2008 election, interestingly, John McCain received more votes on Election Day itself than Barack Obama did. But President Obama won the presidency because he had the right strategy, and he knew when to put his message in the field and when to talk to voters about what, and that was during that vote by mail period. He had a wonderfully impressive vote by mail campaign. During this period of time, you may want to do a direct mail reminder. This is really, really important. What do we know about people who vote by mail? They like to do things by mail. That's how they communicate. That's how they are. So most likely, just like they receive their ballot in the mail, they're thinking mail in those terms. We want to do a direct mail reminder to them and write them. Direct mail reminder, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. It can be a little postcard with a handwritten note. It can come in many different forms. And of course, this builds the anticipation for the rest of the season. Vote by mail ballots get mailed out October 8th this year, and so that's an important date to know. Of course, we have a Super Saturday, same thing, and a ramp week. In the ramp week, you're going to do a lot of volunteer recruitment and list building, and you want to do an evaluation during this ramp week, because this is the ramp week where you're really kicking everything off, and you really want to think about mail versus day of. And what you want to do is mail is your first priority. You want to go through your list, and as you're starting to do volunteer recruitment phone banking, and maybe you're connecting with voters, if you haven't already, you want to find out, if your list is 1,000 people, how many of those people are registered to vote by mail and how many of them are registered to vote at the polls. Because if 600 of them are voting at the polls, then it makes sense that you can put those folks aside until you do your poll push and really concentrate on getting those 400 people to fill out that ballot, seal it up, and send it into the registrar of voters. All right, do we have any questions? I heard a ding. Does someone have a question on the teleconference line?
No,
okay, thank you, Dolores. Does anyone want to share any experiences that they have had from their own campaign or get out the vote experience in the past?
This is Dolores. I'll share really quickly. 2 years ago, we did calls to consumers who we knew were registered to vote or who we had registered to vote within the past couple months, within a certain time frame. So newly registered voters, as well as people who we were familiar with. And what we did was we reminded them that that election day was coming up. We asked them if they knew how they were going to get to their polling place. We helped them locate where their polling place was, as well as figure out transportation. So we gave them bus routes, and we asked them if they knew how to take the bus to there, or if they had someone they could call to give them a ride. And I believe Jessica also gave a couple people rides from a local senior center to the polling place so that to make sure they could vote. So that's one of the ways that we did get out the vote, both within the week before and then also the day of.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dolores. All right, so we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about the War Room. And the War Room is what we typically call our GOTV center on campaigns. It was recently made famous, or I shouldn't say recently, I'm showing my age now, but it was made famous about 20 years ago with the election of Bill Clinton. A group of film people followed his campaign around and saw the insides of it and made a documentary about it called The War Room. The terminology, the War Room, for a campaign room really starts with the Eisenhower campaign, and it came out of Churchill's War Room from World War II, and when he was running for president, Eisenhower was running for president, he decided to call his campaign headquarters the War Room. And here we have a photo of some folks in a campaign war room office. It looks to be from the No on 8 campaign back in 2008, and we have 3 volunteers on phones in the yellow or orange No on 8 shirts, and then a couple other people who may be staff or volunteers on the telephones as well, calling people. So in the War Room, we're going to have our front line. Our front line is our staff, and you're going to need a team of people who are dedicated, whether they're paid staff at your nonprofit or they're volunteers who think that this is an important enough thing that getting people with disabilities out to vote that they commit the time to it and take on responsibility. The first person that you need to decide on is your GOTV coordinator. This person is the leader of the team, and they facilitate the team. They're going to maintain all of the counting and tracking systems, and they're going to organize the outside participation as well. The legal response, poll rides, things like that. You're also going to need a GOTV phone bank coordinator. This person's responsible for writing the Get Out the Vote scripts and obviously coordinating with the GOTV coordinator on that, developing and leading trainings for the phone banks, and leading the actual GOTV phone banks themselves. So if you're doing evening phone banks, it might be important for this person to be a volunteer or someone who can hang out and work in the evening. Then you're going to have your GOTV literature coordinator. This person is going to work with the team and any messaging or media staff you might have at your nonprofit to develop and design the content of the literature. The literature can be direct mail or lit drops, things that are handed to people or sent out in the mail. They're going to organize the direct mailings. That's really important. So they're going to work with the GOTV coordinator on deciding who in that Get Out the Vote list that you've compiled gets a postcard in the mail, and then maybe even finding a vendor and organizing that. And then they're going to organize and lead the lit drop actions. That's dropping the literature on people's doorsteps or going out to public places and giving people literature, reminding them to vote. You're also going to need a GOTV coordinator. So far our volunteer coordinator. So far we've talked about phone banks and literature drops and putting direct mailings together. A person can't do that by themselves, or even a few people, that's a lot for them to do by themselves. So you're going to need volunteers. Most of your nonprofit organizations probably already have someone that serves in this role. They're going to recruit the volunteers, organize the care and feeding of volunteers. Very important. How do volunteers get paid? Because they do get paid. They get paid in pizza. So food and rides as well. Bringing the volunteers to your center, getting them rides. And then you want to lead a volunteer recruitment phone bank, especially in those ramp-up weeks. This person's responsible for getting other people to help them call through all their volunteer lists to sign people up. And then you also want to have a GOTV outreach coordinator. This is very important because this kind of plays into everything. To build your team into a larger capacity to make a louder voice at the ballot box, you're going to need two things: more voters and more volunteers to support and sustain those voters. So this person's going to develop an outreach calendar. They're going to lead outreach opportunities, going to shopping malls, fairs, churches, anywhere they can find people who might want to volunteer. Sign them up to volunteer, but they're also going to develop voter registration and supporter materials and go out and register people to vote. And they're going to recruit voters and volunteers. Let's talk a little bit about tools and resources. Again, we talked earlier about counting our way down to victory, which is counting our way to zero. If we have 1,000 voters that we've identified that we want to push out, we keep checking people off as they told us that we're voting, and we want to work that down to zero. So we want to take that list, and most campaigns have that list listed by precinct. And the reason is if I have a list of 1,000 people, I might have 5 people in this precinct, 6 in this precinct, 25 in this precinct. It's going to be really helpful when you're doing your volunteer recruitment because maybe you know someone in that precinct who can actually go and talk to their neighbors, and having that type of personal touch is important. Knock and drag we talked about earlier. You will find them on election day where you first met them. That's really, really important. Poll rides. Make sure that you have poll rides as a resource. I don't usually recommend that folks doing GOTV campaigns actually put together a poll ride service. It gets really, really complicated and complex to manage, and that takes away from your time managing your voter contact. But there certainly are enough nonprofit organizations and coalition partners around all of us who are already doing that type of free service. So it's a matter of really finding out who's doing it and then keeping that information next to your voter hotline. Usually the League of Women Voters and organizations like the ACLU do it. Legal resources, it's the same type of thing. Remember, for most of us, there may be some lawyers on the training today or in our GOTV campaigns, but most of us are not lawyers. Leave it to the professionals. With as much election work that I've done in different capacities, when it comes down to legal entanglements on election day or regarding even vote-by-mail ballots, I step away. I refer people to the professionals. So you might have some referral resources. Disability Rights California, you can check out on their website. They always have a hotline. The ACLU almost always has a hotline as well. And then some of your other coalition partners locally may have someone that you can call and talk to. Make sure you research this in advance. And of course, the hotline for the Secretary of State's office regarding irregularities is 800-345-VOTE. That's 800-345-VOTE. So tools and resources. Direct mail is a great tool for you to use. Over here we have a picture of some different pieces of direct mail, different sizes. It's important to get your message right on the direct mail. The purpose for us is reminding people to vote. We don't get entangled into other arguments about how people should vote or about debate about issues. Our goal is to register and group together people with disabilities who care about our issues and make sure that they are reminded to vote and that they do actually have the opportunity and the accessibility to go out and vote. You want to find a hook phrase. It's that phrase that makes people go, oh yeah, I got to vote. And then you also want to remember that when someone gets a piece of direct mail, while it may be packed with all sorts of stuff, most people give it 3 glances. So you want to have on 3 different places there something that hooks people in. They see that hook statement, they give it their 3 looks, and it serves its purpose to remind them to vote. And then the other thing is that most people don't pay any more than about 7 seconds of time looking at a piece of direct mail. Very, very important. So why do we use direct mail? Well, you really want to think about the senses. And people come to things in different ways. Some people are listeners, some people are seers, some people touch, some people smell, some people are thinkers, some people are not. And it's one more sense, putting something in someone's hand. We talked about this earlier with the vote by mail people. We know that vote by mail people like to do things in the mail. So we're going to contact them that way. They've self-identified that that's their activism. The next thing you may want to do alongside direct mail is door-to-door lit drops. It's similar to direct mail in the designing of the message and designing of the card. In fact, you can usually use the same card that you do. What this really does for people, it's an extra nudge. It's the human touch, and it just in a small way conveys to the voter that they're part of something bigger than themselves, because someone gave up 2 hours on a Saturday to walk around their neighborhood and come to them and remind them to vote. It's that important to that person. I guess it should be important to me. After all, it only takes me, 10 minutes going into the polling place and out, and I'm there to vote. And then we have a picture to the right of 2 ladies on a porch, and one looks like she's just coming back from shopping. She's got a bag in her hand and her purse. And there's a door hanger from a lit drop on her door, and then there's a volunteer who's just met her at her door holding up a piece of literature to give to her. So now, and I've seen some questions pop up here, and I'll answer them when we get to the Q&A period. I want to move us along here so that we can get through everything. Phone banks. Phone banks are obviously important. We talked about them a lot. You want to make sure you have a script. In your script, you want to answer the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. The who is your organization's name and your volunteer's name, and that they're a volunteer. Even when I work professionally in GOTV circles or campaigns, I tell people I'm a volunteer. If you're a volunteer, you cannot mess up, and someone's not going to argue with you. What? You're reminding them to vote. When? Well, if it's vote by mail, the deadline is today, right? It's always today. Or Election Day, November 6th, 2012. Where? Mailbox or polling place. That's very important. Put that ballot in the mailbox, or make sure that you know where your polling place is. It's not just enough to tell people to vote and to remind them to vote on Election Day, but we need to remind ourselves that we need to ask them, do you know where your polling place is? And keep that polling place list handy at your phone bank. And the why, and that's your compelling message about issues concerning people with disabilities and why people should vote. Make sure you keep that message down to 14 words so that the people on the phone listening can comprehend it, get it, and do it. And the other piece is so the person delivering it, the volunteer, that they can really get their mind around it and effectively and quickly communicate it. Some tips are keep your volunteer resources down to 1 page that they're using, your script and your talking points, including your pushbacks. Try and keep that down to 1 page so they're not overcome with materials. Where do I vote? That county polling place list. Keep that at your phone bank. Another tip is to smile. People can really hear it in your voice when you're smiling and you're on the phone. You want to keep moving. Remind voters that you have many calls to make, and that way they'll let you off the phone and they'll give you a commitment as to whether they're voting or not. And then you want to stay on topic. Get out the vote. Avoid political discussions. Avoid confrontations in conversation. And you also will find it very, very profitable for yourself if you personalize. Use the term "we" a lot. Let them know that they're part of a disability voting team by getting out there and voting, and that they're not alone in this. And then the last thing here is we want to measure our results. Tally, tally, tally. Tallying is very, very important to any Get Out the Vote campaign, and you want to tally at all points in your Get Out the Vote campaign. Most successful GOTV campaigns are doing daily tallies. I tend to tell people, keep it visual. Numbers don't lie. They're a universal language, and you want those numbers on the wall, but you also want to track them electronically in something like an Excel sheet so that you can really do some strategy at your desk. But you want a constant reminder on the wall of where you're at right now. And you can see to the right of the screen, there is a huge, large tally sheet. It's a national GOTV center for probably one of the, I can't remember where I got the picture, but it looks like it's one of the presidential campaigns. Even at the highest levels in campaigns, a war room nationally for a presidential campaign has voter tallies in it on the wall, because counting down numbers is that important. And then also at the end of all of this, you want to make sure you write a final report. Take those numbers and turn them into words. Learn for your future successes. You want to set goals for your next election and trainings to prepare for your next GOTV campaign. You want to find out what you did well and you want to replicate it, but also you want to learn from your mistakes or learn where you could get better, and give yourself a roadmap of what trainings you'll need for you and your team in the next 2 years. So before I open the floor, I'm just going to answer some questions on here. Do you have any scripting for volunteers to use? The network certainly can help you with that. Can we get copies of the PowerPoint? I'd be happy to give you copies of the PowerPoint. We'll send that out to everyone. Do volunteers need badges? It depends on your campaign. It depends on your office and your nonprofit. Some places like them, some don't. If you're doing knock and drag volunteers and people like that on election day, you don't want to have anything about your campaign, your GOTV campaign on you in going into the polling place. That's really, really important. And then a template for tally sheets. In the materials we'll get at the end, there are templates for things like scripts and tally sheets and things like that in there. And then I have a question from Dolores. Is that the same number to report about accessibility issues? Yes, it is. 345-VOTE. 1-800-345-VOTE. Any voting irregularities. So if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. Any questions out there? All right. Yes, and someone put they can also be sent to the Registrar of Voters. That is true. The number 800-345-VOTE goes to the Secretary of State's office. However, your local county Registrar of Voters will also have a phone number that you can call. All right, so we're going to talk very briefly here about who you're going to get out to vote in building your list. You want new voters. You always want to be replenishing your voter list, and even in the 2 years between elections, you want to be doing voter registration. We covered that in our training, Building the Disability Vote, and I encourage you to go on the Systems Change Network website at www.scnet.org. And you can go on the training page, click on trainings, and then click on Archive Library, and you'll find a library of all our past trainings, and you can watch them. And here we have a picture of a young man registering to vote at a voter registration table, and there is a young lady who's helping him. Looks like it's on a college campus. So you also want to take a look at your organizational members. Most of you probably have a natural get out the vote list in your nonprofit already, just like Dolores talked about earlier. In your independent living centers, you have your list of consumers. You have your staff. Hopefully your staff are all registered to vote. Your board members, your advocacy team members. So for example, right now in the Systems Change Network, the nearly 40 Systems Change organizers across the state together collectively have 300 advocacy team members. You have your volunteers and your coalition partners. It's important that you call your coalition partners. If you want your own folks to vote, you have to want your friends to vote as well. So when you group all these people together, you've got a good start at building a list. So you also want to do supporter outreach, finding voters who share support for issues important to people with disability. We talked about pledging in the Building the Disability Vote training, so go back to that one and you can see all about pledging and that type of outreach. There's also in-reach, people who self-identify that disability is an important issue to them by going on your website and signing up for your website, or maybe they're listserv members in a coalition that you're in. Now the other thing that we also want to point out, and we're going to do a little role play here in a moment about voter identification, is that supporter identification. Supporter identification is different from voter identification. Because we're, most of us on this call are from 501c3 nonprofit organizations, we are not able to do voter identification. We can identify our supporters, have them sign a pledge, ask them if they're registered to vote. We can register them to vote, and we can remind them to vote and keep reminding them until they vote. However, we cannot tell them how to vote, we cannot ask them how they're going to vote, and we cannot decide which voters we're going to push out to vote and which ones we're not, based upon any questions that we've asked them about how they're going to vote or impressions that we have on them. That's what voter identification is. Voter identification is taking the next step and asking them how they're going to vote on particular issues or candidates, and then making the decision whether or not to actually get those people out to vote or not. So it's the difference between GOTV and influence. We want to develop new community members, and in all of this we have to respect independence and the choice of the voter. Our goal is to register and push out as many people with disabilities to vote as possible, but we have to respect that is their independence to choose who they want to vote for or about what they want to vote. And here's just a look at one of our pledges. Again, you can go to the other training and see it. This pledge has our logos at the top, a message statement, and a place for people to fill out information. And now we're going to have a little role play. So Cindy and Lauren, if you want to unmute your phone. Cindy Soto is a Systems Change Advocate at Cal Life in Los Angeles, and Lauren Steinberg is a Systems Change Advocate at Center for Independent Living in Berkeley. And we have a little play today, to support or not to support, and it's starring our two stars, Cindy and Lauren. For your visual here, we do have a stage curtain and pictures of both Cindy Soto and Lauren Steinberg, and Lauren's with her dog, and Cindy looks like she just got back from Hawaii. She's got all sorts of leis and flowers and stuff like that in her picture. And really what they're going to do is they're going to model for you a conversation of supporter identification, which is what we want to do, and then they're going to model a voter identification conversation for you, which is what we want to stay away from so that you can hear the difference. So Cindy and Lauren, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Hi.
All right. Hi, how are you today?
Hi, oh, I'm okay. Just doing some shopping.
Oh yeah, me too. Great deals, huh? You know, while I'm shopping today, I'm also out here at Target representing the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, talking with folks in my community about an issue that's really important to me. Do you have a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm a person with a disability, and I'm talking with people in my community about the Fair Education Act that was passed last year. Are you familiar with the Fair Education Act?
No, never heard of it. Act? Is that like a play or a movie or something?
No, no, actually it's a law that was passed by the California legislature last year that will have a positive effect on people with disabilities in California.
Ah, that's cool. Very cool.
The Fair Act, which stands for Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, Respectful Education Act, is a common sense law that requires schools to integrate factual information about social movements, current events in history of people of color, people with disabilities, and LGBT people into existing social studies lessons. It also prevents schools from adopting instructional materials that discriminate. Including disability history in California schools would mean including my history. We think everyone's history should be taught truthfully and with respect. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's cool. It's good to know about other groups. But I think I learned that FDR was in a wheelchair in high school. So don't they already teach that?
Well, you're right, but there is a lot more that it would be important for folks to know about. Like Ed Roberts, who started the independent living movement as a student at Berkeley. This movement grew nationwide. And the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has allowed many people like me to have access to the community and live a more independent life.
Oh yeah, I see your point.
So, we're asking folks today if they support teaching disability history in California schools under the Fair Education Act. Can we count on your support?
Oh, definitely. We should learn about everyone's history. The more the merrier. So what do you want me to do? Vote on something or other?
Well, we aren't a voter campaign, but an education campaign. We want to build a campaign that educates people and changes hearts and minds about this important issue for a long time to come. You can sign my pledge to support the teaching of disability history under the Fair Education Act. That way we can reconnect and keep you updated.
Okay, I'll sign it.
Great, thanks. Just fill in here, and please print clearly so we can read it later. Also, put your phone number and email address if you'd like us to contact you later about important updates.
Okay, here you go now. Gotta run. There's a sale on bling over at Forever 21.
Sure thing, thanks.
All right, thank you, ladies. Let's give them all a good round of applause. Those are our actresses for today in our role play. They just did a supporter identification role play, and thank you all to the folks out there using their applause function, giving them some applause. And Dolores just typed into the chat box clapping. So as you can see, they stayed away from the voting issue, but they kept really about support for the issue itself and building a larger base of support to educate people. So now I want to hand it back off to them to show you what a voter identification conversation would be like. And they're actually, because most of that conversation would have been the same at the beginning, they're going to pick up the same conversation but a little bit later in it. Go ahead, ladies.
Oh yeah, I see your point.
So we're asking folks today if they support teaching disability history in California schools under the Fair Education Act. Can we count on your support?
Oh, definitely. We should learn about everyone's history. The more the merrier.
Well, you know there's going to be a ballot initiative in November to overturn the Fair Education Act.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the opponents of fairness and freedom have put this on the ballot. Can we count on you to vote no on the Fair Education Act repeal in November?
Oh, sure, man. Everyone is always trying to trample on other people's freedoms.
Great. I'm glad you think that way. Can you sign my pledge to vote no on the initiative to repeal the teaching of disability history under the Fair Education Act when it's on the ballot in November?
Okay, I'll sign it.
Great, thanks. Just fill in here, And please print clearly so we can read it later. Also, put in your phone number and email address so we can recontact you and remind you to vote and vote no.
Okay, here you go now. I gotta run. I just woke up and I need my Starbucks.
Sure thing. Thanks.
All right, let's give them another round of applause. That was cool. So we're going to open it up for a little bit of discussion right here for a very quick period of time. This is our question and answer period. So if anyone has any questions, go for it, put them in the chat box or raise your hand. If you want to speak a question, unmute your phone. Just going to tell everyone we probably, we're getting near towards the end and we're speeding through this information, but we'll probably go about 3 or 4 minutes over the 3:30 mark. This will be recorded so you can see it later, and we can, if you have to leave, we can get you the handouts to come along with it. And Corrine asked the two skits, what did you call them? One was the support pledge and the other one was voter ID, right? Yes, the first scenario was someone doing supporter identification, and which is what is okay for us to do as nonprofits. And the second one was voter identification, and that's what we want to stay away from. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. Do I hear someone coming on to ask a question? So the next thing that we're going to talk about in our final section today is preparing for access. We've got two great speakers with us today. Phil Shepard, who's done some polling place accessibility work, and his done a project in Marin County, and then of course George Sharp at Drail, who's been doing this kind of work for many, many years. On our slide here we have a picture of one of the staff members, I believe, at DRC in Long Beach, Disability Resources Center of Long Beach, using the eSlate machine, an accessible voting machine. And we're going to start now talking about preparing for access. So polling place accessibility issues don't just happen on Election Day. We have to be cognizant of them well in advance, and we have to be prepared for them. It takes a long time to check out all those polling places and everything. So this is what our next video is. It's a demonstration video on the eSlate.
Hi, I'm Bob Foster, Mayor of the City of Long Beach, and I want to introduce you to a new technology that makes it easier for voters in Long Beach to cast their vote, the eSlate. The eSlate is an easy-to-use interface device, and unlike marked or punch ballots, you can go back and change your vote if you've made a mistake or changed your mind. And for persons with disabilities, it's even better. Before eSlate, you had to have someone go in the voting booth with you, revealing your personal preferences. Now with eSlate, you can cast your vote in private and you can be truly independent.
eSlate is easy to use. Simply use the dial wheel to enter your access code. Then navigate through the ballot with the dial wheel to choose the candidate or issue to vote for. After making your choice, simply press enter and you automatically move to the next choice. eSlate allows you to easily go back and correct mistakes or change your mind. When you're all done with your ballot, eSlate allows you to review your ballot and check to see if you missed anything. When everything looks right, simply press Cast Ballot and your vote is cast securely. Until eSlate, voters with disabilities often needed an assistant in the voting booth with them to cast their votes. Now all voters can make their choices privately. eSlate includes audio capabilities for visually impaired individuals. Using the dial wheel, eSlate speaks the choices on the screen and allows you to hear the ballot. For people with mobility impairments, eSlate includes buddy buttons, which take the place of the dial wheel. In addition, people who use sip and puff devices can connect their device to the eSlate to cast their ballot. Just let the election worker know that you would like to use your sip and puff. eSlate is available on the date shown on your screen, up through Election Day, right here at City Hall. Emergency voting is also available, along with voting on Election Day on the times listed. Our eSlate machines are located in the first floor lobby and are very easy to access. Simply visit the City Clerk front desk and they'll direct you from there. In the current election, you must be a voter registered in the districts listed on the screen. To learn more or to hear a recording with these important dates, please visit the Long Beach election website at www.longbeach.gov/elections.
Of all the 88 cities in Los Angeles County, Long Beach is the only city that has eSlate. And I think it shows our commitment to push the ADA technology even further. It's time for all voters to be able to vote independently and in private.
All right, thank you very much, Rosemary. And there were two systems change advocates that were in that video. Richard Hernandez from Long Beach at Disability Resources Center, and Cindy Soto, who we heard in the role play earlier from Cal Life in Los Angeles. And Richard, are you able to talk on the phone and just tell us a little bit about how you were able to do that video?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, it was the city clerk. He got a grant. He had some money left over, so he was thinking of what should he do with the money that was left over. So he decided that maybe we should get the machines so that people with disabilities could vote. So what he did was he contacted DRC to find out if it was worth purchasing the machines. He came down here, gave a demonstration, and he also went to the Citizens Advisory Commission on Disabilities, which I'm a part of. And we also took a look at the machines, and we thought they were good, that we could use it. People with different disabilities were using the machines, and they were doing it on their own without any assistance. So we told him that we thought it was a good idea. So he did purchase, I think, about 3 machines. But right now they're only in City Hall, so if people need to vote, we have to go to City Hall and vote there. But our next goal is to have the machines all over the city of Long Beach. We have 9 districts, so we're trying to put a few machines in every district, but those machines are very expensive, so that's what we're trying to do now. But they're great machines.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for your advocacy getting this video put together. Mark Ramoser from Silicon Valley had a great question. Does every county use eSlate, or are there other types of machines out there? I know that George will probably want to address that in just a couple minutes, but yes, there's lots of other types of machines out there. You can go to the Secretary of State's website at www.sos.ca.gov/elections, and you can find a list of all of the machines that are used by county. And now we're going to move along here. Thank you. And I'm going to hand it off to Phil Shepard for just a couple minutes here to talk about preparing for access and participating locally and sharing the story of what MCIL did in Marin County. And on this slide here that Phil's going to be talking from, we have a picture from the street of the building that MCIL is in, Marin Center for Independent Living. Are you there, Phil?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, excellent.
Yes, we can.
Well, we started out in 2010. We were contacting the Board of Elections because we had complaints that some of the places in our county were not accessible, and there were some problems with getting ballots transferred from one place to the other. So we contacted them, and they were very willing to form a committee called the Voter Access Advisory Committee. And we meet probably quarterly each year. And one of the things that came out of that was to reevaluate all of the polling places in the county. And we went to over 22 sites, and they had 3 ways of describing them. One is accessible, one is usable, and the last one is inaccessible. And in some cases,
there was nothing that could be done because it was a very remote area of the county, and that was the only public facility that was available. In that case, they had made a special area on the sample ballot that said, voters with special needs, is my polling place accessible? And if you looked on the back of your pamphlet, it indicated at that address with an accessibility symbol whether it was or it wasn't. If it wasn't, and it said yes underneath it, if it said no or it was said usable, then they gave you the option of calling in and asking to find another place to vote at, or they could vote by mail. If you chose to go to another place, then they needed 2 weeks' notice, and they could send off your ballot to another area. And you understand that in some cases, different districts have other items on there that wouldn't be common to all districts, and so it's important to get the right ballot sent there. They also had, you could notice to them that you needed special types of modifications or accommodations, wheelchair access, magnifiers, pens with grips that are easy to hold, auto mark, sip and puff. All you needed to do was notify them in advance and call them up and let them know, and they would have it available for you. What's interesting is the machine that you showed on the screen there, all of our accessible polling places have that in place right now. Let's see now. The people on the committee. The people on the committee consist, of course, of the Board of Elections and the Division of Aging and Marin Center for Independent Living. And we went out to all, as again I said, we went out to all the polling places to check on them, and found that some actually were accessible that had been marked only usable or not accessible. And many of the places were schools, so that kind of assured that that was going to happen. But some of the places were private clubs and churches, and some of the places were senior citizen centers and actually buildings that were under HUD where you had assisted living centers. We had almost 80% this past year voting by mail in our county, which is quite high for us. And my wife and I both served as clerks at polling places for 3 years now to make sure that the accessibility issues were addressed by the registrar of voters. I don't know if you don't have any of my pictures up there, so that's about what I can tell you. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any. Oh, I should tell you that we used a polling place accessibility checklist when we went to all of these places, so that we were assured that we covered all avenues. For example, paths of travel. We also did an inventory of parking spaces. We checked the ramps going in and the size of the doorways. We checked everything that was on the list there, and I would suggest if you're going to go out and do that, that you use one of the polling place accessibility checklists that's available.
Yeah, and I know that George is going to talk about those, and there will be a polling place accessibility checklist in all of your materials. Did I hear someone with a question for Phil?
Dolores, but you just answered it. Never mind. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? So, Phil, how long did it take you to look at all the polling places in your counties?
About 7 months.
Great.
Because they're all over the county, and we really had to do an in-depth, check of the places. And then we also tried to help look for alternative locations.
Oh, great.
As well.
And how many people were on your team that actually did that work of going out and looking at them?
There were 4 of us.
And were they staff members or volunteers?
No, just myself. I'm the only staff member. All the others were members of the peer support
That's
group.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Phil, and thank you very much for your service to the people of California and the disability community by going out and checking on the accessibility of all the polling places in your county. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to
Thanks a lot, Ted, and your presentation was just incredible.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to hand it off to George, George Sharp at Drail, and George is going to talk to us about really in more detail what we're looking for in polling places to make sure that they're accessible.
Okay, again, we're going to talk about polling place accessibility, and the thing that we've done here in Stanislaus County, we started with back in 2004 with the Stanislaus County registrars. They contacted us because they were really looking for in-depth surveys of their polling locations to really get a depth of how inaccessible they were. At that time, they were using a lot of houses for polling locations, and they wanted to get away from the houses because they knew that they weren't accessible. So they contacted Drail to do the accessibility on a lot of the houses and a lot of the mobile home parks that they knew that they wanted to get away from. So in doing that, we used one of the survey tools, and what you're going to see from these slides are some of the tools that we used. And so what we did is translated those tools and came up with this. And so what we're looking for is the parking mainly. Is you want to make sure that in any polling locations they have at least one van accessible space, and that van accessible space should be at least 9 feet wide, with the passenger aisle at least 8 feet wide. And if you know their polling location, go out and look at it before. But if you happen to go out on election day and they don't have one, make sure that they've also created one. That's something that they can do with cones. And you also want to look for path of travel. Is there an accessible route of travel provided for the accessible parking space, the accessible entrance of the polling location? And you want to make sure that accessible space doesn't go behind parked cars. And something that is critical is you want to make sure that the path of travel is at least 48 inches wide, and it could only be 36 inches wide at a single point. And what we've noticed is that a lot of polling locations, the path of travel has been narrower, so they've had to move them and choose other alternative locations, or they've actually chosen alternative path of travel, which the path of travel might be longer, but it's more accessible. Inside the polling location, you want to make sure that the voters have a seated area where they can vote in a private area. Some voters may not want to use the accessible voting booth or the AutoMark or the E-Slate. They may want to use the traditional voting method. So it's a good idea to make sure that they have a area where they can vote privately, because an independent private vote is essential. This is a perfect example of a perfect polling location. And you see it's got a ramp. It's kind of like in a corridor, but as you see it has perfect path of travel. And all the voting locations can be accessible. And it has the scooter that's going into the voting booth. and the table is easily gotten to for all entrants. So this is an example of the perfect voting location, and it actually can be found on ada.gov. Now the next slide is something unique to Stanislaus County, and what it is called the Franklin 4 Station. And it is a new type of voting booth. And it's got 4 locations, and it stands up, and it has one section that is lower, and it has the center one. It actually has a gentleman that's voting, a person in a wheelchair that's in the lower section, and then the last part of it is folded up. This is the new type of voting booth. And really what it does is it creates a different type of way of voting and really kind of blows the perfect poll out of the water, because you can have a multitude of these in a polling location and create a different type of voting location. And this is what our county has, and they only have one per voting location. And our last election with the primary was the first time they've been used, and they were a hit with voters. They also come with accessories with the lights, and you could also get them with curtains. And it is a great deal for space savers if you all. So it works great. And it can be found at inclusionsolutions.com. And this slide is the AutoMark. This is something that Stanislaus County uses. We have one in every single polling location. And it works great for voters with hearing, but those who have visual impairment, those who have mobility impairment, and those with all types of different disabilities. I know when this machine came out, I tested it. So it's been in our county ever since it came out.
Thank you very much, George. And on the AutoMark machine, we were going to watch a video on it. It takes about 4.5 minutes, but in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually email everyone who registered the links to all the videos, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint and all of the handouts that we have today. Do we have any questions for George? I see Dolores had a question, George. Clarification on 9 foot wide. Is that from the driver's side line to the far side line of the space?
The parking space itself is in between where the vehicle parks.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, I'm starting to upload the files for the handouts, and as soon as they're uploaded, we'll be sending them. Give me one moment here, folks. All right, so we're going to be sending you 4 files. The first one is rather large. It's about 85 pages, and it's your total GOTV manual with some addendums to it. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. Today's webinar is being recorded, and in 3 to 5 business days, it will be archived on our website, the Systems Change Network website, which is www.sc scnetca.org. Again, this was the third part in a voting series that began with building the disability vote, organizing meetings, and of course today's training, empowering the disability vote. All three of those you'll be able to watch. Building the disability vote and organizing meetings are already on our website, so you can download those and go ahead and watch that. And also, the Systems Change Network is on the web, so please check us out on our website, which we've talked about. But we do have a Facebook account, and we like people, and we like people to like us. So please check us out on Facebook and like us. You can find us on Twitter at @SCNetwork. And we have a Yelp account, and we do Yelping on the accessibility of businesses that we go to on our Yelp account. And our Yelp account is SCNetCA. So thank you for participating in today's webinar. We would appreciate if you would share your experience with us by completing the survey. Your feedback is highly valued, and participation is greatly appreciated for our future webinar opportunities. When you exit the webinar platform, a pop-up training survey will appear. Thank you very much again for attending the webinar today, and we really certainly would like to hear your feedback. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and don't forget to get out and vote.